guys, in today's lecture we'll be looking into alternative centers of power. So, in the overview, after the end of the bipolar structure of the world politics, it became clear that the alternative centers of political and economic power could limit America's dominance. Thus, in Europe, what happened? The European Union, in Asia, the Asian Southeast Asian nations, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, have emerged as forces to reckon with. Okay, while evolving regional solutions to their historical enmities and weaknesses. Both the European Union and ASEAN have developed alternative institutions and conventions that built a more peaceful and cooperative regional order and have transformed the countries in the region into prosperous economies. The economic rise of China has made a dramatic impact on world politics. In this chapter, we take a look into some of these emerging alternative centers of power and assess their possible role in the future. Okay, this is a poster of China under socialism, Mao. Now we come to the current picture in which how it emerged as a dominant economy. Okay, as a European Union, as the Second World War came to an end, many of Europe's leaders grappled with the question of Europe. There was a question of Europe. Should Europe be allowed to revert to its old rivalries or be reconstructed on principles and institutions that would contribute to a positive conception of international relations? The Second World War shattered many of the assumptions and the structures on which European states had based their relations. In 1945, the European states confronted the ruin of their economies and destruction of the assumptions and structures on which Europe had been founded. European integration after 1945 was aided by the Cold War. America extended massive financial help for reviving Europe's economy under what was called the Marshall Plan. The US also created a new collective security structure under NATO. Under the Marshall Plan, the Organization for European Economic Cooperation, OEEC, was established in 1948 to channel aid to the West European states. It became a forum where the Western European states began to cooperate on trade and economic issues. The Council of Europe, established in 1949, was another step forward in the political cooperation. The process of economic integration of European capitalist countries proceeded step by step. Okay, leading to the formation of European Economic Community in 1957. This process acquired a political dimension with the creation of European Parliament. The collapse of the Soviet bloc put Europe on a fast track and resulted in the establishment of European Union in 1992. The foundation was thus laid for a common foreign and security policy, cooperation on justice and home affairs, and the creation of a single currency. The European Union has evolved over time from an economic union to an increasingly political one. The European Union has started to act more as a nation state. While the attempts to have a constitution for the European Union have failed, it has its own flag, anthem, founding date, and currency. Okay, it also has some form of common foreign and security policy in its dealings with other nations. The European Union has tried to expand areas of cooperation while acquiring members, especially from Soviet bloc, previous Soviet Union countries. The process has not been proved easy, for people in many countries have not very enthusiastic in giving the European Union powers that were exercised by the government of their country. The European Union virtually becomes the government of the country. Okay, there were also reservations about including some new countries within the European Union. So this is a map of the European Union states. The older members are given in violet and the newer members are given in orange. So you can look into it. Okay. The European Union has economic, political, and diplomatic and military influence The European Union is the world's second biggest economy with a GDP of more than 17 trillion in 2016, next to that of United States of America. Its currency euro can pose a threat to the dominance of United States dollar. Its share in the world trade is much larger than that of the United States, allowing it to be more assertive in trade disputes with the US and the China. Its economic power gives its influence over its closest neighbors as well as Asia and Africa. It also functions as an important bloc in international economic organizations such as World Trade Organization. The European Union also has political and diplomatic influence. One member of the European Union, that is France, holds permanent seat in the UN Security Council. The European Union includes several non-permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Okay, this has enabled the European Union to influence some US policies, such as the current US position on Iran's nuclear program. Its use of diplomacy, economic investments, and negotiations rather than coercion and military force have been effective, as an case in its dialogue with China on human rights and environmental degradation. When we went to US, it was more of a hard power policy, but in European Union, it is diplomacy, economic investments, and negotiations that pave the way. Okay, militarily, European Union combined armed forces are the second largest in the world. Its total spending on defense is second after the US. Two European Union member states, Britain and France, also have nuclear arsenals, approximately 550 nuclear warheads. It is also the world's second most important source of space and communications technology. It as a supranational organization, European Union is able to intervene in economic, political, and social areas. But in many areas, its member states have their own foreign relations and defense policies that are often at odds with each other. Thus, Britain's Prime Minister Tony Blair was America's partner in Iraq invasion, and many of the European Union's newer members made up of US-led coalition of the willing, whereas Germany and France opposed American policy. There is also a deep-seated Euroscepticism in some parts of Europe about the European Union's integrationist agenda. Thus, for example, Britain's former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher kept UK out of the European Union. Brexit. Okay. Denmark and Sweden have resisted the Maastricht Treaty and adoption of euro, the common European currency. This limits the ability of the European Union to act in matters of foreign relations and defense. Okay, defense. Now, Association of South East Asian Nations, ASEAN. Take a look at the political map of the world. Which countries would you say fall in the southeastern region of Asia? Before and during the Second World War, this region of Asia suffered the economic and political consequences of repeated colonialisms, both European and Japanese. At the end of the war, it confronted problems of nation building, the ravages of poverty and economic backwardness, and the pressure of allying with one great power or another during the Cold War. This was a recipe for conflict. Okay, it was actually, the world was divided at that time, which the countries of Southeast Asia could ill afford. Efforts at Asian and Third World unity, such as the Bandung Conference and the Non-Alignment Movement, these were ineffective in establishing the conventions of informal cooperation and interaction. Hence, the Southeast Asian alternative by establishing the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. ASEAN was established in 1967 by 5 countries of the region, that is Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, by signing the Bangkok Declaration. So, question can be asked, Bangkok Declaration is related to which organization? It is related to ASEAN. Okay, the objectives of ASEAN are primarily to accelerate economic growth and through the social progress and cultural development. A secondary objective was to promote regional peace and stability based on rule of law and the principles of United Nations Charter. Over the years, Brunei Darussalam, Vietnam, Lao PDR, Myanmar, Cambodia joined ASEAN, taking its strength to 10. Unlike European Union, there is little desire for ASEAN for supranational structures or institutions. Asian countries have celebrated what has become known as ASEAN Way, a form of interaction that is informal, non-confrontationalist, and cooperative. The respect for national sovereignty is critical to the functioning of ASEAN. With some of the fastest growing economics in the world, ASEAN broadened its objective beyond the economic and social spheres. In 2003, ASEAN moved along the path of the European Union by agreeing to establish an ASEAN community comprising three pillars, namely ASEAN Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. This is the ASEAN flag. Okay, this is a 10 stalks of paddy represent 10 Southeast Asian countries born together in friendship and solidarity. The circle symbolizes the unity of Asia. Okay. Now, the Asian security community was based on the conviction that outstanding territorial disputes should not escalate into armed confrontation. By 2003, ASEAN had several agreements in place which member states promised to uphold peace, neutrality, cooperation, non-interference, and respect for national differences and sovereign rights. The Asian Region Forum, which was established in 1994, is the organization that carries out coordination of security and foreign policy. ASEAN was and still remains principally an economic association, while the Asian region is as a whole is a much smaller economy compared to that of the US, the European Union, and the Japan. Its economy is growing much faster than all this. This accounts for the growth in its influence both in the region and the beyond. The objective of the Asian Economic Community are to create a common market and production base within Asian states and to aid social and economic development in the region. The economic community would also like to improve the existing Asian dispute settlement mechanism to resolve economic disputes. ASEAN has focused on creating a free trade area for investment, labor, and services. The US and China have already moved fast to negotiate FTAs and with ASEAN. ASEAN is rapidly growing into a very important regional organization. Okay, its vision 2020 has defined an outward-looking role for ASEAN in the international community. This builds on the existing Asian policy to encourage negotiation over conflict in the region. Thus, ASEAN has mediated the end of the Cambodian conflict, the East Timor crisis, and meets annually to discuss East Asian cooperation. The current economic strength of ASEAN, especially its economic relevance as a trading and investment partner to the growing Asian economies such as India and China, makes this an attractive proposition. During the Cold War years, India's foreign policy did not pay adequate attention to ASEAN. But in recent years, India has tried to make amends. It signed trade agreements with Asian members like Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. Okay, the Asian Indian FTA came into effect in 2010. ASEAN's strength, however, lies in its policies of interaction and consultation with member states, with dialogue partners, and also with non-regional organizations. It is only regional association in Asia that provides a political forum where Asian countries and the major powers can discuss political and security concerns. Okay, rise of Chinese economy. Let us now turn to the third major alternative center of power and our intermediate neighbor, China. The cartoon on the following page over here. Like here Manmohan Singh is getting used to the idea of Asian culture. Okay, China has been the fastest growing economy since 1978 reforms. Okay, China's it's projected to overtake US as the world's largest economy by 2040. Its economic integration into the region makes it the fast is a driver of East Asian growth, thereby making it an enormous influence in regional affairs. The strength of its economy, together with other factors such as population, landmass, resources, regional location, political influence, adds its power in significant ways. After the inception of the People's Republic of China in 1949, following communist revolution under the leadership of Mao, its economy was based on Soviet model. The economically backward communist China chose to sever its links with the capitalist world. It had little choice but to fall back to its own resources, and for a brief period on Soviet aid and advice, the model was to create a state-owned heavy industry sector from the capital accumulated from agriculture. As it was short of foreign exchange it needed in order to buy technology and goods on the world market, China decided to substitute imports by domestic goods. Okay, this model allowed China to use its resources to establish the foundations of all industrial economy on a scale that did not exist before. Employment and social welfare was assured to all citizens, and China moved ahead of most developing countries in educating its citizens and ensuring better health for them. The economy also grew at a respectable rate of 5 to 6%. But an annual growth of 2 to 3% in population meant the economic growth was insufficient to meet the needs of growing population. Agriculture production was not sufficient to generate a surplus for economy. Okay. In chapter 2 we discussed the crisis of state controlled economy in USSR. A similar crisis was to face in China too. Its industrial production was not growing fast enough. What happened? International trade was minimal and per capita income was low. The Chinese leadership took major policy decisions in 1970s. Now change is happening in China. China ends its political and economic isolation with establishment of relations with United States in 1972. Prime Minister Zhou Enlai proposed the four modernizations, that is agriculture, industry, science and technology and military in 1973. By 1978, then leader Deng Xiaoping he announced the open door policy and economic reforms in China. The policy was to generate higher productivity by investments of capital and technology from abroad. China followed its own path in introducing a market economy. The Chinese did not go for shock therapy but opened their economy step by step. They didn't openly open the economy suddenly. Okay, it went in a step by step manner. The privatization of agriculture in 1982 was followed by the privatization of industry in 1998. Trade barriers were eliminated by a special economic zone (CES) where foreign investors could set up enterprises. In China, the state played and continues to play a central role in setting up a market economy. The new economic policies helped Chinese economy to break from stagnation. Okay. The image of Great Wall and a dragon are two symbols most commonly associated with China. Cartoon shows both these to depict China's economic rise. Okay, who do you think is the little man in this cartoon that can stop this dragon? We will see. Okay, privatization of agriculture led to a remarkable rise in agricultural production and rural income. High personal savings in the rural economy led to an exponential growth in rural industry. The Chinese economy including both industry and agriculture, grew at a faster rate. The new trading laws and the creation of special economic zones led to a phenomenal rise in foreign trade. China has become the most important destination for foreign direct investment anywhere in the world. It has large foreign exchange reserves that now allow it to make big investments in other countries. China's ascension to the World Trade Organization in 2001 has been a further step in its opening to outside world. The country plans to deepen its integration into the world economy and shape the future of world economic order. While Chinese economy has improved dramatically, not everyone in China has received benefits of the reforms. Unemployment has risen in China with nearly 100 million people looking for jobs. Female employment and conditions of work are bad as in Europe of the 18th century and 19th centuries. environmental degradation and corruption have increased besides the rise in economic inequality between rural and urban residents and coastal and inland provinces. However, regionally and globally, China has become an economic power to reckon with. The integration of China's economy and interdependencies that this has created has enabled China to have considerable influence with its trade partners. Hence, its outstanding issues with Japan, the US, ASEAN, and Russia have been tempered by economic considerations. There are economic relationships with all these countries, although there are other differences or disputes. It hopes to resolve these differences with China, which it regards as a renegade province. Okay, they believe it as a one China, that is, it is part of China. By integrating it closely to its economy, fears of China's rise have also been mitigated by its contributions to the stability of Asian economies after the 1997 financial crisis. Its more outward looking investment and the aid policies in Latin America and Africa are increasingly projecting its world as a global player in the side of developing economies. India China relations. Okay, it is very important in current situation. India and China were great powers in Asia before the advent of Western imperialism. China was considerable influence and control on the periphery of its borders based on unique tributary system. At different times in China's long history of dynastic rule, Mongolia, Korea, parts of Indochina and Tibet accepted China's authority. Various kingdoms and empires in India also extended their influence beyond their borders. In both cases, this influence was political, economic, and cultural. However, the regions where India and China exercised influence rarely ever overlapped. Thus, there was limited political and cultural interaction between the two. The result was that neither country was very familiar with the other. In the 20th century, when both nations confronted each other, they had some difficulty evolving a foreign policy to deal with each other. After India regained its independence from the British and China expelled the foreign powers, there was hope that both would come together to shape the future of the developing world and Asia of world and of Asia particularly. For a brief while, the slogan Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai was popular. However, what happened? That led to a military conflict over border dispute between two countries marred that hope. Soon after independence, both states were involved in differences arising from the Chinese takeover of Tibet in 1950, the final settlement of the Sino-Indian border. China and India were involved in a border conflict in 1962 over competing territorial claims, principally in Arunachal Pradesh and in Aksai Chin region of Ladakh. Conflict of 1962, in which India suffered a military reverses, had long-term implications for China-India relations. Diplomatic relations between the two countries were downgraded while 1976. Thereafter, relations between two countries began to improve slowly after the change in China's political leadership. From the mid to late 1970s, China's policy became more pragmatic and less ideological. So, it was prepared to put off the settlement of continuous issues while improving relations with India. A series of talks to resolve the border issue were also initiated in 1981. Since the end of Cold War, there have been significant changes in India-China relations. Their relations now have a strategic as well as economic dimension. Both view themselves as rising powers in global politics and both would like to play a major role in Asian economy and politics. Rajiv Gandhi's visit to China in December 1988 provided the impetus of improvement in India-China relations. Since then, both governments have taken measures to contain conflicts and maintain peace and tranquility on the border. They also have signed agreements on cultural exchanges and cooperation in science and technology and opened 4 border posts for trade. With India and China trade growing at 30% every year, a more positive perspective on relations with China have emerged. Bilateral trade between India and China has increased from 338 million in 1992 to more than 84 billion in 2017. Most recently, both countries have agreed to cooperate with each other in areas that could otherwise create conflict between the two, such as bidding for energy deals abroad. At the global level, India and China have adopted similar policies in international economic institutions like World Trade Organizations. India's nuclear test in 1998, sometimes justified on the grounds of threat from China, did not stop greater interactions. It is true that China was seen as contributing to building up of Pakistan's nuclear program. China's military relations with Bangladesh and Myanmar were viewed as hostile to Indian interest in South Asia. However, none of these issues are likely to lead to conflict between the two. One sign of this is that the talks to resolve the boundary question have continued without interruption, and military to military cooperation is increasing. Chinese leaders and Indian leaders and officials visit Beijing and New Delhi with greater frequency, and both sides are now becoming more familiar with each other. Increasing transportation and communication links, common economic interest, and global concerns would help establish a more positive and sound relationship between the two most populous countries of the world. Recently, relationship between two countries have taken a downside. Border disputes, China-Pakistan economic corridor, and Chinese support of Pakistan in UN against India's move to counter terrorism are some of the factors for it. So you can read about Japanese influence. It is a good box, and also South Korean influence. So with this we conclude today's lecture. I hope today's lecture was productive for you guys. Until next time we meet again, God bless you all. Jai Hind.